Okay, so I'm just trusting that it's going to work, and if it doesn't, then we'll always have this recording of this screen that we can use. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm just going to open up Xcode. I'm also going to open up Android Studio, and I have this feeling that people are a little bit confused about various different things. Um, in particular, I think people are confused about just programming in general. And this is a whiteboard that I'm going to use to write stuff on. So mostly, I think it's just like a lack of maybe like basic understanding of what we're doing. So we are programming, right? Which basically means using text to send commands to a computer or another type of device. Um, in this class, you're either using Swift or you're using Kotlin. Those are the two different languages. And it really doesn't matter what you use because they're extremely similar. These are basically the same thing. Like it's really not too terribly difficult or different. They're just kind of like two peas in a pod. In fact, if I look at Android Studio and Xcode, even the apps themselves are pretty much the same. We're using Swift in Xcode. This text is a little weird in this app, so I'm just going to kind of go with it. We're using Kotlin in Android Studio. And then lastly, we're using GitHub, right? And the purpose of GitHub is for us to share and collaborate with our projects. So GitHub, if I just visit it real quick, is like absolutely essential if you want to get into this industry, or even if you just want to work in like any computer adjacent industry. GitHub is sort of the place to go. Just a second, I got to get my verification code that I know I'm not supposed to live stream to people, but regardless, I'm gonna do it. Verify your device. Okay. So like to show you, like a lot of people are wondering like what's the point of GitHub? It's really to collaborate and share your projects together. I have my personal GitHub, and then I also have one called ASU Swift. This is a class by in-person students that are working, and I can see everything that they've done. So 6 hours ago, this guy Tim worked on this project. And 7 hours ago this student was working on this project, and so on and so forth. So I can see what they've added and what they've changed, and really like these are for like the more advanced classes. So I just want to reiterate how important this is to your success. It is not uncommon that if you go on a job interview, this is what they'll pull up. This is your resume for design work, for programming work, for all of that. This is my one for school, but I have tons of these repositories, and I'm part of this organization, like I talked about, the ASU Swift, which is also called the Apple Fritters. They have different repositories. Here's one that we'll look at just briefly, which has 31 commits from 6 different people. And these go across the board of what they're working on and what they've added, what they've changed. So really, like your literacy of GitHub is just as important as your literacy of these programming languages. Okay, I just want to clarify that for everybody. I just realized I'm not sharing my screen on this, and that's fine. It's in the recording, so the recording that I upload will also have this with it. But just realized that. Whatever. It's been a long day. So yeah, Swift and Xcode. We've got Kotlin and Android Studio, and we've got GitHub, and these all work together. So the reason I like to have your assignments submitted through GitHub is because it gives you that experience of dealing with version control software, which again, it's totally essential to your work as an artist or as a designer or as a programmer. So I'm going to just kind of move all of this over here. So within these programs, where do they go? There they are. Let's start with Xcode. right? Xcode has a playground system where you can make blank files and work with them. And it's just like REPL, which we've been using in the other section of the class, right? You write out your code here, and it executes on this right-hand side over here. Once it finally runs, I keep not sharing my screen, sorry. Let me switch back. So like in a playground, right, it looks like this. And then we've also been using REPL, which looks like this, right? Same kind of thing, same sort of system. And as we write code, it executes on this right-hand side. Same with REPL. Let's work in Android Studio now. Where's Android Studio? So one of the main things I see is just kind of people lacking a base understanding of like what Android Studio is and how this works. I'm going to start a new Android Studio project, and we have a bunch of different activities. I'm going to start an empty activity. That's what we're going to work with until this week. I haven't released this week's content because I really feel like it's good that we kind of touch base on all this. But I have this empty activity. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to just call it, I don't know, add some numbers on the end there. And I'm worried that people maybe aren't watching all the videos. It kind of seems like that too, that there's sort of a lack of like, okay, I'm actually watching all the videos and reading all the content, and instead they're just jumping into the assignment. This is definitely not the class for that. This is definitely not the class to just jump into the assignment. You don't want to do that. It's way too much, man. Like there's too much in this class to just be jumping directly to the end. On this side, we have the app. Within that folder, we have the Java folder. Within that, I have my org folder. And within that, I have my main activity.kotlin file. And that's what I'm writing my code in. And then under res, which stands for resources, and under layout, I have one called activity main.xml. And that is our file that has all of our UI, right? So our UI is in this file, our code's in this file. Let's just hide some of all this stuff. So it seems like people are understanding this aspect where we like work through this palette and add different things. For example, I add a button down here, just drag and drop it in. And now that button's in place. It has an ID over here on the side, and that's how I can link it in code. And then this hello world text right here has, this actually doesn't have an ID. Interesting. So by default, I guess it doesn't have an ID. I'm gonna just delete it. And we'll add a new piece of text. But this is just a plain text view, right? So there's my text view. It has an ID called text view. I could rename this to anything I want. It doesn't matter. I'm just checking to make sure my video is still sharing. Cool. On the sidebar, I got all this stuff. On my Kotlin file, I have all this content, which these can be twirled down. I just noticed people just seem to be struggling with really understanding what's going on here. Simple, simple, simple. That's the best way to do it. Just simplify everything. Here's our text view. It's called text view. Here's our button. It's called button. Let's jump into our code. Let's write a function for our button. Whenever I hit my button, I want to change my text. So I'll write fun, right? That's how we declare a function. Then I need to give it a name. It's any name that I want it to be. I could call it button tapped. And then we're going to give it some parameters here. We're going to say view. Is that right? I always get this backwards because I'm working with... Oh, there we go. Sorry, I have spent the day teaching C# as well as Swift, and now I'm transitioning into teaching Kotlin and Swift this afternoon during our time. So, sorry, I keep like sending us to the infinite void every time I move over. Okay, so I have this function called button tapped, and it's linked to my view. The reason I have this linked to my view is so whenever I go back, I can tell it, hey, connect to the view right here. On click, meaning on tap, execute this function. Every time I tap this button, this chunk of code, so from here to here, this chunk of code is going to execute. All right? Really simple. From here to here, that's going to get executed every time I tap it. So let's change our text view's text. So there's our text view. It's called text, if I can spell. And if I do dot text equals, and let's give it a string value like hi there. Every time I tap it, it's going to say hi there. I don't need to run this, but you understand that that works. If I tap this, it's going to say hi there, and we're good to go. So this, I think people seem to get. Maybe not even this, and that's okay. But what we've done is we've written a function called button tapped, right? It's just, a function is just something that's being executed. Let's go back to our, uh-oh, it looks like it dropped my thing. That's really fun. So a function, right, in Kotlin looks like this. It looks like fun, and then a name, followed by your parentheses, followed by your curly braces, right? A function in Swift looks like, oh God, sorry, my brain is everywhere today. Let me open up Xcode real quick. It's func, right? I think it's func. Yeah, func, name, same thing. Okay, so that's a function, right? A function is executed every time something happens. Whenever we call it, it's executed. And in our case, we have our function called button tapped, and it is tied to the button. So every time we tap that button, it's going to call this function and execute it. Okay? So again, doesn't really matter what we name it. No, we can name it whatever we want. Within these parameters, in Kotlin, it's pretty common to do something like this. Button tapped. Followed by the parenthesis, followed by the curly brace, right? That's pretty common. In Swift, it's common to do something like this. If this was tied to like an IB action, it might look like this. But you don't need to actually type this, right? Because you can do it in the interface. But IB action, button tapped, right? So same thing. So doesn't really matter. That's how it works. This is tied to the code, or to the interface now, and to the code, and every time we tap it, it's going to say hi there. If I go back, and I know I'm not sharing my screen right now, I'm kind of giving my Wi-Fi a break. I'm at school, and it seems to not want to really behave, but I'll try again. Okay. So it says hi there, right? It's got this function right here. It says hi there, and every time I tap it, it's going to say hi there. So what if we start mixing in some variables? And remember, a variable is just a placeholder, so let's declare one called var. What do we want to call it? Let's call it a number, okay? And it's of the type integer. It doesn't really matter. We don't have to put this integer there. We could just go like this, right? And it's going to infer that it's an integer. And let's say it starts at 5, okay? And so we're going to print that value. That means print that value. So it's going to print the value of a number every time we tap this button. What if we incremented that? What if we said a number plus equals 1? So that means add 1 to it every time. So it starts at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And every time we tap it, it's going to print that value. Let's go back to our activity and let's run it. Oh, I have no constraints. That's probably not a good thing. Yeah, in fact, we're going to power this thing down. So we need to add constraints on here, right? And we can just do these magic constraints if we want to. And that'll pretty much get it right. Don't worry about this hard-coded text. There we go. My computer's feeling it now. Sharing my screen and emulating this stuff all at once is a lot. There we go. 6, 7, 8, 9, right? Every time I tap it, it's incrementing by 1. Because what's happening in my code is I'm saying, here's this number up here, add 1 to it every time I tap the button, and then print it out every time I tap the button. That $sign, a number, just means convert it to a string. We could also do something like this. This is exactly the same. To string. This is the same thing. Doesn't matter. It's just totally your style, your preference. So we're adding 1 to it every time. If I change this to 10 every time, right, it's going to look different. It's going to add 10 to it. So it's going to go 15, 25, 35, etc. Let me exit out of this. The computer is like screaming right now because of all this that we're running. Yeah, and it looks like it messed up my session. There we go. Back in here. So yeah, it's probably going to mess up the session every time anyways, and that's okay. I think mostly the screen recording is what people came for. So what do we learn? We have variables and they hold values, right? Those values can be changed. We can add, subtract, multiply, etc. So in that example in Kotlin, I said var, and then I called it a number. Doesn't matter what you call it. And it's equal to 1, let's say that. So it starts at 1. And if I say a number plus equals 2, that plus equals, by the way, just means add to that and make it equal to that. So now a number is equal to 3, okay? So now it's equal to 3. Pretty basic. Okay, let's go back in here. So it's a 5, we're adding 10 to it, and then we're just simply saying, hey, change the text to equal this. All right? Now, some of you worked really hard on the rock, paper, scissors and got it done, and some of you, I think, just totally did not do rock, paper, scissors, or even really try. I think you were overwhelmed. I'm going to break down rock, paper, scissors, and we can just basically use these functions. We can use a function or a series of functions, some if statements, right, which are pretty simple conditional statements, and then some simple things like variables to hold some values. So, sorry, I've been at school since like 8 today, and basically just teaching all day. So let's do this. Let's kind of sketch out our idea for rock, paper, scissors. So we have rock, paper, scissors. So what is the game of rock, paper, scissors? I choose one of 3 options, right? My opponent, probably spelled that wrong, chooses one of 3 options, and then from that, we see who won and who lost, or if it was a tie. Okay, so I can already kind of see this in my mind, just sketching it out. I'm thinking, all right, here's my interface. This is going to be a bad sketch. I'm drawing with a touchpad. I'm going to have 3 options, rock, paper, scissors. I'm going to have some text that shows you what they chose. I'm going to have some text that shows you what I chose. And then we'll have some text in the middle that says who won or who lost, right? And I'll probably have some button or something appear to turn that off. So let's get that interface built. I'm going to hop back to my main activity, hide that design, hide this run log if I can. Okay. Let me go back to sharing my screen. Okay. So text view down here. Text view up top. Text view in the middle. Button down here. Button down here. Button down here. So let's change that button text to say, we'll call this one rock button. Paper button. Paper. And now we have scissors button. Scissors. Okay. So we got 3 buttons. Sorry, I'm just checking to make sure my screen's still sharing. There's my text view, there's my other text view, and there's my other text view. So notice I'm labeling these with the ID. So I'm going to call this text view what we chose. Okay. We'll have that text say what we chose. This one will be win, lose, view. I'm just going to have this empty for now. This one will be what they chose. Whoops, that's my ID. What they chose. Okay, super simple interface. I'm just going to save. I'm going to do auto constraints on this because I'm lazy. All right, cool, 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 cool. Got my constraints right. Blackboard Collaborate is a fun thing, isn't it? Again, I'm sharing my my other screen, so it's not like it's that big of a deal. Okay. Maybe it's just ASU's Wi-Fi. That might be what it is. All right, so I got a rock, paper, scissors button. I'm going to jump to my main activity, and I'm just going to delete what I already had in here. So let's hop down and let's write some functions. So we'll do a function called paper button pressed. Save view. Let's grab this. And we need 3 of these, right? So that one's paper. This one's rock. This one's scissors. Okay. I'll sign those a little bit later. Oh, sorry, it's my chair. Well, let's just do it now, actually. So we'll have rock tied to rock button pressed, paper tied to paper button pressed, and scissors tied to scissors button pressed. Pretty self-explanatory, right? So then we have this text label, which is called what we chose, this text label, which is called win, lose, view, and this one is what they chose. So let's just write those in some comments up here. So what we chose, what they chose, win, lose, view. Those are the 3 things that I'm working with. So, all right, hopping back in here, let's go back to our whiteboard. So we have a function, and this, by the way, is exactly the same in Swift, just different writing, right? But it's exactly the same. So our function is going to be just, we'll say just a button was pressed, right? So that could be rock or whatever. And we'll give ourselves the last curly brace here. So what are the things that need to happen whenever this happens, whenever we press this? So when we press this, we need to generate what the opponent chose, right? We need to display what the player chose. We need to display what the opponent chose. We need to compare the two and decide who won, lost, or drew. Right? Makes sense? Okay. So that's my function button was pressed. Okay, so let's jump back in. So we're going to generate what the opponent chose, display what the player chose, and display what the opponent chose, and yada, yada, yada. So let's share my screen again. Okay, so I'm back in here. I got paper button pressed. I'm going to say, so the first thing we need to do is pick what the opponent is choosing. And how I'm going to do that, how I'm going to handle that, is basically they're going to use a random number generator to generate a random value for the opponent and have a choice based on that value. Let's do something like 1 equals, we'll just do it in the order I have, paper, 2 equals rock, and 3 equals scissors. There's a million ways to do this. We could do this with enumerations. We could do this with custom structures and stuff, but I'm just doing a simple number-based way of handling this. Let me make sure my mic is sharing. Yeah. Okay, so we've got that function paper button pressed. So we're going to generate a random number. Okay. So the best way to do that is I'm going to search generate random number in Kotlin. Random, and we talked about this before, right? We had a whole thing on this. But what we're doing is we're using random next int. I think this is what we used in ours. Until, and then we tell it a number. So we could do next int until 2. So let's say 2, so we'll do 0 because it counts 0. I forgot about that in Kotlin. Swift does not. So we'll say when this runs, we're going to create a value called opponent choice, and it's going to be equal to next int, or we need to do random, right? I think it's random dot next int, and we need to give it a value. Let's give it a value of, oh God, Blackboard is the worst. Hello? Oh, there we go. Okay. So let me just share my screen again. If you're watching this video after the fact, this might be an annoying process, but you get to see what I go through every day to use Blackboard. Okay. So I'm in here. So it's going to pick until, I don't think this is how I write it. I think I just write it like this, right? So we'll say until 2. So it's going to do 0, 1, and 2. Right? 0, 1, and 2. Let's create a switch case. So we'll call case, it's a win, isn't it? Again, sorry for my different option. Well, we already know what it's equal to. It's equal to 2, right? So let's change some of our text that's displayed, right? Because we're going to change what they chose, which is called what they chose. So what they chose dot text equals, and we're going to say they picked. Oh, we need to do what we chose first. My apologies. In this case, it's paper, right? Because it's paper button pressed. So we do need to create a when, or in you know what, I'm just not even going to bother with Blackboard because I don't know if people are going to be on here. I feel like it might just be better to just record the screen and have it on here. So if this is our function so far, okay, so we need to say what we chose, and this is it. So now we need to figure out what they chose. So if we look at that when statement, I don't know if you remember when statements in Kotlin, which is like a really powerful element of Kotlin, we could say basically we write it like this. We write when, and then in parentheses, we're going to write opponent choice, because that's the value that we're evaluating. So when the opponent choice, and then we write our little curly brace. So when they have chosen, and then do you remember we draw a little arrow from their choice? So we say when they chose 1, or when they chose 0, it equals, and what did we say? We said 0 would equal paper. And we'll kind of fancy this up a little bit. 1 would be rock. Is that how I have it? Yeah. And 2 would equal scissors. Okay. And what we're actually doing here is executing like a little function. So what we probably want to do is say, like, instead of paper, we would say something like, I'm just going to write it out here, val, like we're going to declare a new value called like choice text or something like that. We don't even need to do that. We could just actually, let's just straight up print it in here. Let's just print it directly. So we'll change that text view, which was called what they chose dot text equals, and we'll say they chose paper, right? And then we'll do the same thing for these underneath it. I'm going to go back and write that in my code and then just share my screen briefly. Or I guess I can just share it now. I'll share my screen. Okay, so let's say we do when opponent choice is equal to 0, and then we're going to just print. So let's do that. We'll do what they chose dot text equals they picked paper. If we got a 1 out of that random number generator, what they chose dot text equals they picked rock. And then the last one, of course, is what they chose dot text equals they picked scissors. So that's what we're going to display, and then we display what we picked, right? And then we need to actually evaluate who won and who lost, right? So we can think of this that, right, if they pick 0 and we picked 0 here, right? Then we lost. If they picked 1 and we picked 2, you know, and we picked 0, then we won. And if we picked 0 and they picked 2, then we lost. So we can write that out like this. I'll just kind of write win conditions here. Let's do this back on that Blackboard so that it's in real time. Okay. So we're going to have the same kind of thing. We're going to do like a whoops, there we go, there's my text. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do when opponent choice, is that what we called it? Opponent choice. And we'll say the same thing. We'll say if they picked 0, I guess we could just add this to the line above. We would just have to do it as a separate statement. But let's say when they pick 0, we'll do, I think we called it win-lose text. Win-lose view, I'm sorry. So win-lose view dot text equals like or it's a draw. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to do this for each one. So that's they picked rock, we picked paper, so we won that one. So win lose view dot text equals we won, and then you can guess what we're doing for 2, which is win lose view dot text equals they won. Okay. Share my screen and we'll do this real quick. So I'll share my screen. Okay, so let's do this. So we could do it as separate statements on here, but let's just do it as a separate thing. So we'll say when opponent choice, so same thing. When it's 0, win lose view dot text equals it's a draw. We won. And the last one, we lost. Okay, so let's take this code. So this is the whole thing, right? We just did the entire thing basically in one go. Let's grab this whole code. It's not too long either. Paste it for rock. Paste it for scissors. Okay, and for rock, what do we need to change? Well, we don't need to change this first part. We just need to change this part. So if they picked paper, we lost, right? If they won, or if they picked 1, we drew. And if they picked scissors, we won. So then same thing here. So with this first one, so if they picked paper, we won. If they picked rock, we lost. And if they picked scissors, it's a draw. All right, so you can see, I gotta reload my session again because Blackboard sucks. But you can see, okay, we built the whole thing, right? So we won, we lost, we drew. All right, we got the whole code written. It's really not that complicated, right? We just wrote it once, evaluated those values, and then from there we used it. So let's go ahead and run our app and see what happens. See if we have any errors or anything. Okay. What they chose, what we chose, rock, paper, scissors, rock. They picked rock. It's a draw. We picked paper. Oh, something's wrong here. Oh, I never changed the we picked text. Okay, so that's a little bug fix we need to do. So let's hop back into our main Kotlin activity. So we picked paper. Totally forgot about that. We picked rock. And we picked scissors. All right, let's save that and let's run our thing again. All right, so we got rock. We picked rock, they picked paper, we lost. Paper, we picked paper, they picked paper, it's a draw. Scissors, they picked rock, we picked scissors, we lost. Nice job. So we just built the whole thing in not too long. Just a few lines of code. And we are cooking. So I think we're good. I'm gonna go ahead and quit out of the simulator. So I just want to, I hope that helped maybe, just going through the whole assignment. I have videos going through the whole calculator and videos going through the other assignments so far, so I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and that you guys understand, you know, what the point of the class is and what we're doing with the class. Yeah, you can't skip anything. Like, this is a class where, yeah, you're gonna have to watch every single video, and you may have to watch those videos multiple times. That may just be part of your process. I think the best way to approach any problem is to just kind of break it down by what you want to do. Like, break it down sort of step by step, how we wrote at the beginning, what needs to happen. Be thinking about that. Don't get overwhelmed with the code, right? Getting overwhelmed with the code is not going to help anybody. But thinking about, oh, okay, so I need this to happen, this to happen, this to happen, that is what's going to make it work. So I just want to encourage you to focus on actually making the thing rather than overthinking it or overcomplicating it. Let me get a cup of water real quick. Okay, so I think that covers a lot of what I wanted to really talk about today, is like, how do we actually, you know, get these apps moving and get these things going. I just want everyone to feel confident in themselves, feel confident in what they're doing in the class. If it doesn't make sense, then just take it slow. Email me, ask me for an extension. I'm happy to do that. The assignments, the goal is not to confuse you. It's to just give you these problems that you can solve. So we just did that in Kotlin. I don't really want to do it again in Xcode. I guess I could, theoretically, but it's the same process, right? The code is almost exactly the same. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's it. So getting it onto GitHub. Let's talk about that. So we need to get it onto GitHub, right? To turn it in. I have my GitHub set up on my computer. I'm looking at my screen right now. I'm going to just share. And I don't really develop for Android that much, so it may take me a second to find it. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, I'm on my screen and I'm finished with my project. I'm going to push it to GitHub. I should just be able to go to VCS, import into version control, and say share project on GitHub once I'm finished. Okay, I'm going to give the repo a name. So I'm going to call it a repository. So I'm going to call it like rock, paper, scissors, Kotlin. And just say share. and it's going to create that GitHub repository. It's going to ask me, hey, do you want to send all these files? And I can say my initial commit. That's fine. I'll say add. And it says pushing to GitHub master, and it might take a little bit, and now it's successfully shared. If I go over here, I'm going to go back to GitHub. If I refresh my page, I should have a new repository. I do, called Rock, Paper, Scissors, Kotlin. You can clone and download this if you like. Just go to my page and find it. But there's my whole project. All right, so that's really the process we're getting on GitHub. Let's say I updated something. Let's say I added like a new line right here. Just I do the same thing. I go VCS and I say commit. And what that means is it's committing those changes that I made. My commit message, I'll say I added a comment. And I need to click this little guy and say commit and push. Commit and push. Push. And that's going to update those changes. So it's pushing and it finished. So I go back to GitHub. If I refresh, I should have 2 commits now. Yeah, so I got 2 commits. If I click that, I can see my 2 different versions that I made. That's what I like to see. I don't want to see you guys committing, it's hard for me to help you if you email me at 11 p.m. the night before the assignment's due. Email me early in the week. Look at what you need to do for the week after you watch the videos and figure out, okay, this is what I need to get done, and start working on it. I want to see a lot of commits from you. I want to see you working hard on an assignment and figuring out what works and what doesn't. So yeah, I'm gonna wrap up this session. This was about an hour, almost exactly an hour. If you need more help, just let me know. But I think this was a good sort of starting session. If you have any specific questions, shoot me an email. We'll figure it out.